I can still hear the sound of water lapping against wood. Even now, months later, in my apartment hundreds of miles from Lake Calder, that gentle rhythm haunts my sleep. It should be soothing. It's not. The rental cabin looked exactly as promised in the listing: rustic pine interior, wraparound deck, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the lake's vast expanse. It was the first vacation I'd taken since my divorce, a chance to decompress, to find myself again. That's what everyone says you need after a marriage dissolves, right? Time alone to recalibrate. The village of Lakeridge was typical small-town America. One main street lined with family businesses, locals who smiled but kept their distance from summer people, and the centerpiece, a pristine lake that stretched for miles, its surface often as smooth as glass. The brochure called it nature's mirror. On my second morning, I walked to town for supplies. At the general store, I made small talk with the cashier, a woman in her 60s with deep wrinkles around her eyes, either from smiling or squinting at the water her whole life. "First time in Lakeridge?" she asked, bagging my groceries. "Is it that obvious? New faces stand out here." She glanced at my rental keychain. "Stayin' at the Mercer cabin?" I nodded. Something flickered across her face, a hesitation so brief I almost missed it. "Beautiful spot. Just stay out of the water after sunset, honey. Lake gets tricky with the light." I laughed. "I'm not much of a night swimmer anyway." She didn't smile back. Just nodded once, handed me my change, and turned to the next customer. Walking back, I noticed the locals' relationship with the lake seemed complicated. Children played along the shoreline under watchful eyes. Fishermen went out at dawn but always returned by late afternoon. The rental boats came with strict instructions about being docked before sunset. Reasonable safety precautions, I thought. Until I began to notice other things. The lake house next to mine was vacant, windows boarded despite peak season. The deck that extended into the water had a section missing, jagged wooden beams jutting out like broken bones. When I asked about renting a kayak for the week, the outfitter looked relieved when I specified. Just for daytime paddling. On my third night, I sat on the deck with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the water crimson. As darkness fell, the lake transformed. Without light, it became a vast black void. I could still hear it, gentle waves brushing the shore, but couldn't see where water met land anymore. That's when I first noticed the lights. Small, flickering points beneath the surface, like fireflies trapped underwater. They appeared maybe 50 yards out, glimmering in sequence, first 3, then 5, then a scattered dozen moving in what seemed like patterns. Bioluminescent algae, I reasoned. Or reflections from distant homes across the lake. Yet something about their movement seemed deliberate. I leaned forward, straining to see better. One light separated from the others, drifting closer to my dock. I fumbled for my phone to record it, but by the time I returned, the lights had vanished. The next morning at the cafe, I casually mentioned the lights to the waitress. The coffee pot she was holding slipped from her grip, shattering on the floor. The diner fell silent. "Sorry," she muttered, avoiding my eyes as she swept up the shards. "Clumsy today." An older man at the counter turned to me, his weathered face grim. "Where exactly did you see these lights?" When I described the location, he exchanged glances with others in the cafe. "Probably just fish with the moonlight hitting their scales," he said finally, though there had been no moon that night. "Like I said to the documentary people last year, nothing unusual about our lake." "Documentary people?" The cafes seemed to collectively inhale. "Some students," a woman interjected. "Making a nature film. They left early. College deadlines and such." That evening, curiosity drew me to the local library. The librarian, a young man with anxious eyes, directed me to their local history section, which consisted of exactly one shelf. "Is there anything about unusual phenomena in the lake?" I asked. "No," he answered too quickly. "Just fishing records and tourism pamphlets." But as I browsed, I found a thin folder labeled Lake Incidents, Official Records. Inside were newspaper clippings, spanning decades, drownings, disappearances, boats found drifting without passengers. Most occurred after sunset. Most remained unexplained. A yellowed article from 1987 caught my eye. Local teen missing after night swim. The grainy photos showed a smiling boy, 17, who vanished during a midnight swim dare. The final paragraph mentioned his friend's claim that he had followed moving lights in the water. The librarian appeared beside me. "We're closing now," he said, though it was only 4 p.m. He gently but firmly took the folder from my hands. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I stood at my bedroom window, staring at the black expanse of lake. The lights appeared again, more numerous this time, forming a large circle that slowly rotated. Then came the knocking. 3 distinct taps on the lakeside door. I froze, heart pounding. 3 more taps, slightly louder. Though the cabin had motion sensor lights outside, none had activated. I crept downstairs, peering through the glass door toward the deck. Nothing but darkness. As my eyes adjusted, I realized all the night sounds had stopped. No insects, no distant calls of nocturnal birds. Just silence and the gentle lapping of water against the dock. Then I saw it, a wet handprint on the outside of the glass, too large to be human, fingers too long and oddly jointed. Water dripped from it, forming a small puddle on the deck. I backed away, then ran upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom until morning. When dawn broke, I checked the door. The handprint was gone, but the wood of the deck beneath it was warped and discolored, as if chemically altered. At the police station later that morning, the officer listened to my story with practiced patience. "Probably just kids," he said, not looking up from his form. "They pull pranks on summer people. I'll drive by tonight, check things out." "What about the lights in the lake?" I pressed. His pen paused. "What exactly did these lights look like?" When I described them, he closed his notebook. "Miss Chen, when was the last time you had a psychiatric evaluation?" "Excuse me? We get this every summer." He sighed. "People come here stressed, isolated in cabins, minds playing tricks. Last year, a filmmaker stayed 5 weeks trying to document these lights. Nearly drowned himself. We had to confiscate hours of empty footage before sending him to county mental health." I left humiliated, but certain of what I'd seen. That afternoon, I met Tim, another vacationer staying further down the shore. He seemed normal, friendly, a welcome distraction from my growing paranoia. We had dinner at the local pub, where he listened attentively to my experiences. "Actually," he said, lowering his voice, "I've seen the lights too. And I've been recording my observations." He showed me his notebook, detailed entries with times, patterns, locations of the lights. Finally, someone who believed me. Tim suggested we watch together that night. Safety in numbers, he reasoned. I agreed, relieved not to be alone. After sunset, we sat on my deck waiting. Hours passed with normal night sounds and nothing unusual. I began to wonder if the phenomena had stopped because I'd reported it. "Maybe we should call it a night," I suggested around midnight. "Just a bit longer," Tim insisted, his voice oddly tight. "They'll come." At 12:42 a.m., the lights appeared, bright, pulsing, mesmerizing. Dozens this time, swirling in complex patterns just beneath the surface. Tim stood transfixed, staring with an unsettling intensity. "Beautiful," he whispered. "Just like they said." "Like who said?" He didn't answer, just stepped closer to the edge of the deck. The lights congregated directly in front of him, pulsing in sequence. "Tim?" Slowly, he turned. His pupils were massively dilated, nearly eclipsing his irises. "They'd been calling me for days," he said, his voice strange and flat. "But they want you more. They've always wanted you. Since you were a child." A chill ran through me. "I've never been here before." "Haven't you?" "They remember you. From when you almost joined them. 8 years old, Camp Lakeridge, summer of '96. You were in the water after hours, you saw them, but someone pulled you back." My blood turned to ice. I'd never told him about my childhood, about the summer camp incident, the reason I'd chosen this lake for my vacation, to face an old fear. I'd nearly drowned here as a child, was revived on the shore after being pulled from the water by a counselor. For years afterward, I'd had nightmares about lights underwater, calling me deeper. Tim's smile was wrong, stretched too wide. They've been patient. 27 years is nothing to them. They've been here for centuries, growing, waiting. The locals know. They sacrifice the occasional tourists rather than themselves. Small price for protection. He lunged suddenly, grabbing my arm with inhuman strength. Time to reconnect with old friends, he hissed, trying to drag me toward the water. I fought desperately, breaking free only by striking his temple with a heavy flashlight. He collapsed on the deck, and I ran, not to my car, which was blocked by his, but into the woods, toward the main road. As I fled, I glanced back once. Tim's body was being pulled into the water by elongated, pale appendages that had reached up onto the deck. The lights beneath the surface had become a frenzy of activity. I ran 3 miles to the police station, hysterical. When officers finally returned to the cabin with me hours later, there was no sign of Tim. His car remained in the driveway, keys in the ignition. The lake was serene in the morning light. We'll file a missing persons report, they assured me, though their lack of urgency was palpable. One officer whispered to another, "Summer people and their night swims. When will they learn?" They found Tim's wallet and phone in my cabin, his hotel keycard. Record of his check-in, but mysteriously, no reservation in the system. No social media presence. The ID in his wallet traced back to a man who had died 3 years earlier. I left that day, breaking my rental agreement, ignoring the property manager's protests that I'd forfeit my deposit. As I drove away, I noticed flyers on the community bulletin board advertising record tourism numbers expected for next season. A smiling family posed on a dock, sunset turning the lake golden beneath the tagline. Lake Ridge, make memories that last forever. I haven't slept well since. My therapist calls it trauma response. My new psychiatrist adjusts my medications monthly. But sometimes, in the shower, I catch a whiff of lake water. And at night, I wake to find wet footprints leading to my bed that dry before morning. Last week, my bathroom sink backed up, pushing dark water into the basin. When I leaned closer, I saw them, tiny points of light swirling in the water. They found me. And I know what they want. The strangest part? I've started to want it too. To understand what's beneath the surface. What they've been trying to show me all these years. I've booked a return trip to Lake Ridge next month. A lakefront cabin again, but this time, I requested the Mercer house specifically. The property manager sounded surprised, then pleased. "We don't get many return visitors," she said. "The lake will be waiting for you." I know it will. And this time, I think I'll go night swimming after all. The first thing they teach you about fishing is patience. What they don't tell you is how that patience can twist into something else entirely when you're alone with your thoughts for too long. I've been staring at the same spot on Blackwater Lake for 17 days now. The locals have started to notice. It began as a simple fishing trip. After my sister Ellie's disappearance 3 months ago, my therapist suggested I reconnect with activities that once brought me peace. Fishing had been our father's passion, one he'd passed down to both of us. Ellie was always better at it. More patient. More observant. More everything. The cabin I rented sits on the northwestern shore of Blackwater Lake, a modest body of water tucked away in a valley that tourism forgot. The rental owner, Mrs. Keene, handed me the keys with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're from Springfield originally, right?" she asked, studying my face carefully. "My family was," I answered. "We moved away when I was 12. She nodded, seeming to relax slightly. "Not many people come back once they leave. Especially not to fish." "Why's that?" "Lake's been fished out for years. Don't expect to catch much." Yet on my first morning, I watched an old man in a weathered aluminum boat pull in 3 large bass within an hour. When our eyes met across the water, he immediately packed up and left. That afternoon, I ventured into town for supplies. The convenience store was one of those places where conversation stops when a stranger enters. The cashier, a man with a faded tattoo of coordinates on his forearm, rang up my items silently. "Any fishing tips?" I asked, trying to break the ice. "I'm staying out on the North Shore." The man's eyes flickered to a woman's stocking shelves. "North Shore's not good for fishing anymore," he said flatly. "Chemical runoff from the old mill. Fish there are wrong." "Wrong how?" He bagged my items quickly. "Just wrong. I'd try the South Shore. Or another lake entirely. But I stayed on the North Shore. Something about the stillness of the water there called to me. And despite what the cashier said, I saw plenty of fish, their dark shapes gliding beneath the surface, some unnervingly large. On my third day, I caught nothing, but found a waterlogged disposable camera tangled in some reeds. On a whim, I took it into town to the pharmacy that still advertised 1-hour photo development. The technician's face changed when she opened the camera. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice tight. "In the reeds near the old dock." She closed the camera quickly. "This was underwater. Then the film's ruined. Nothing to develop. But I saw the images, stark black and white shapes on the negatives. I don't mind if they're water damaged," I insisted. "I'd still like to see them." "Store policy," she said firmly. "We don't develop ruined film. Waste of chemicals." She dropped the camera into a bin behind the counter. "Don't fish the North Shore. Especially not alone." That night, I had the first dream. I was underwater, looking up at the distorted outline of a boat. A fishing line descended into the depths beside me. In the dream, I was aware that I wasn't human. My body was elongated, my movements sinuous. I felt a deep hunger as I approached the lure. I woke sweating, the sheets tangled around my legs. The clock read 3:17 a.m. From the direction of the lake came the sound of a boat motor, though when I looked out the window, I saw only still, black water reflecting the moon. The next morning, I found a Polaroid photo nailed to the dock post. It showed a group of teenagers on a boat, grinning at the camera, dated July 1998. I recognized one face immediately, Mrs. Keene, the cabin owner, decades younger but with the same tight smile. In the background, partially cropped, was another familiar face, my father. When I called my mother that afternoon, her voice sounded strained when I mentioned Blackwater Lake. "Why did you go there of all places?" she asked. "There are dozens of better lakes for fishing." "I don't know. Something drew me here." A half-truth. "Did Dad ever bring us here when we were kids? Before we moved?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom? We never took you children there," she finally said. "Your father went alone sometimes. For work." My father had been an accountant. "What kind of work would Dad do at a lake?" "Ryan, listen to me carefully. That place has nothing to do with Ellie. Do you understand? Nothing. Come home. Please." But I couldn't leave. Not with the sense that the lake was trying to tell me something. Something about my sister, about my father, about the lies that had accumulated like silt over the years. On my 7th day, I met David Harmon, seemingly the only friendly local. He sat down beside me on the shore as I cast my line, his own tackle box at his feet. "Any luck?" he asked. I shook my head. "Been here a week. Nothing's biting. Maybe you're using the wrong bait." He opened his box, revealing an array of hand-tied lures I didn't recognize. "Try this one. Local specialty." The lure he handed me was unusual. Dark feathers wrapped around the hook with what looked like red thread, but felt organic when I touched it. "What's this made from?" "Family secret." He winked. "Been catching blackwater fish for 3 generations. With his lure, I caught my first fish that afternoon, a large, pale bass with cloudy eyes. When I went to remove the hook, I noticed something protruding from its mouth. Using my pliers, I extracted what appeared to be a small metal object, a woman's earring. I recognized it instantly. It was Ellie's. When I looked up to show David, he was already walking away, his pace unhurried but deliberate. I called after him, but he didn't turn around. That night, I examined the earring under the cabin's harsh light. Sterling silver with a small blue stone. I'd bought the pair for my sister's 29th birthday last year. She'd been wearing them the day she disappeared. The police report had mentioned them specifically. I didn't sleep. Instead, I went through the files I'd brought with me, newspaper clippings, the police report, my own notes about Ellie's disappearance. She'd left her apartment to meet someone and never returned. Her car was found at a shopping center 2 counties over. No witnesses. No suspects. Just another woman who vanished. But now, her earring. In a fish. In this lake. The next morning, I drove to the local sheriff's office with the earring in a plastic bag. Sheriff Mills was a heavy-set man with calculating eyes. He listened to my story without expression, turning the bag over in his hands. "Miss Chin," he said finally, "do you know how many missing persons cases we get where the troubled individual just decided to start a new life elsewhere? Your sister had problems, according to your statement 3 months ago. Minor depression. Who doesn't these days? And that doesn't explain her earring in a fish." He sighed. "This lake gets all sorts of trash thrown in it. Jewelry, electronics, you name it. Fish swallow things. As for this specific earring, it's a common design. Sterling silver with turquoise. You can buy it at any department store. It's blue topaz, not turquoise. And it's hers." Something shifted in his expression. "I'll make a note of it. Meanwhile, how long do you plan to stay in town?" "As long as it takes." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Cabin rentals aren't cheap. Must be nice to have that kind of leisure time." I fished every day after that, using David's lure. I caught 7 more fish over the next week. Each one contained something: a button, a zipper pull, once a fingernail painted with chipped red polish. I kept them all. The locals watched me from a distance, their faces unreadable. On day 14, Mrs. Keene came to the cabin. She stood in the doorway, refusing to enter when I invited her in. "You need to stop," she said without preamble. "Stop what?" "Fishing. Asking questions. Disturbing things." I showed her the collection of items I'd recovered. "Someone put these in those fish. Someone who knows something about my sister." She wouldn't look at the items. "This isn't about your sister. You're mistaken." "Then why did I find her earring?" Mrs. Keene's face hardened. "Your rental agreement ends in 3 days. It won't be extended." That night, I woke to the sound of voices outside. Through the window, I saw flashlights moving along the shore, 5 or 6 people walking slowly, methodically. They were dragging something heavy between them. I grabbed my phone to call 911, then stopped. Sheriff Mills had made his position clear. Instead, I recorded a video of the shadowy figures and the large object they carried to the end of the dock. They loaded it onto a boat, then motored out to the center of the lake. I couldn't see what happened next, but 20 minutes later, the boat returned empty. The following morning, David Harmon was waiting at my dock. "Found something you should see," he said, his expression solemn. He led me to his truck and drove us to a storage unit on the outskirts of town. Inside was a makeshift laboratory, microscopes, sample containers, water testing equipment. "I'm a biologist," he explained, seeing my confusion. "Been studying this lake for years. Off the books." He showed me water samples, slides with tissue specimens, photographs of fish with strange growths and mutations. "The mill didn't just dump chemicals," he said quietly. "They disposed of industrial waste, experimental compounds. The kind of stuff that accumulates in tissue. Bioaccumulation. What does this have to do with my sister?" He hesitated. "The town has a system. Has for decades. When someone gets sick, really sick, from the water, they handle it internally." A chill ran through me. "Handle it how?" "The fish in this lake are unique now. They've adapted to the contamination. They process things differently." "You're not making sense." David rubbed his face. "Your father understood. He helped set up the financial structure, the payments to affected families, the arrangements with the county medical examiner. My father, the accountant, who visited this lake for work. My sister never came here. She lived 3 states away. No, but you did. As children. Brief visits with your father. He paused. The effects can take decades to manifest. Neurological symptoms first. Confusion, personality changes, paranoia. Your sister's minor depression was likely just the beginning. I thought about Ellie's increasingly erratic behavior in the months before her disappearance. The memory gaps she'd complained about. The headaches. Are you saying the lake made her sick? That she came back here? I'm saying the town has a protocol for dealing with liability. People who might remember too much, ask too many questions. His eyes were sad. They would have made it peaceful. They're not monsters. They killed her, I whispered, the truth settling like stone. And now you're here, asking the same questions. Having the same symptoms. He pointed to my hands. I looked down to see them trembling, a tremor I'd noticed starting a few days ago. Just like Ellie's. We were both contaminated as children, I said, understanding finally dawning. And now I'm showing symptoms too. David nodded. They'll make the same offer they made your sister. The same one they've made dozens of others over the years. What offer? Compensation to your family. And a choice. Leave town and live with increasingly debilitating symptoms until you end things yourself, or let them handle it with dignity. Here. Where they know how to make sure nothing connects back to the lake. I thought about the figures dragging something to a boat the night before. A weight being dropped into the depths. The fish, I whispered. They feed the remains to the fish. Nature's perfect disposal system. These particular fish break down everything, metals, synthetics, bone. What they can't digest, they store. Sometimes for years. I stared at him, horror mounting. Why are you telling me this? You're one of them. Because I'm dying too, he said simply. Same contamination. And I'm tired of the secrets. When he dropped me back at the cabin, Sheriff Mills was waiting, along with Mrs. Keene and several other townspeople I recognized from the store. Mr. Harmon, the sheriff said, his voice hard. You've violated council policy. David stood straighter. He deserves to know. Know what? I demanded. That you murdered my sister? Mrs. Keene stepped forward. She chose, Ryan. We gave her options. She chose the peaceful way. You expect me to believe she chose to die? We have her on video, the sheriff said quietly. We record the statements. For liability reasons. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. Show me. They brought me to the town hall, a small building I hadn't noticed before. In a basement room, they played a video on an ancient television. Ellie sat in a chair, looking tired but composed. My name is Elizabeth Chen. I'm making this statement of my own free will, with full understanding of my condition and prognosis. She described her symptoms, the tremors, the confusion, the blinding headaches. A doctor explained her brain scan results in clinical terms: lesions, deterioration, untreatable damage from early contamination. I choose option B, she said finally, looking directly at the camera. Ryan, if you ever see this, don't blame them. And don't stay here. Leave. Never look back. The screen went black. We have the same offer for you, Mrs. Keene said gently. We've had your water tested since you arrived. You're drinking from the tap. The deterioration is accelerating. I touched my trembling hand to my face, felt the dampness there. Why did our father bring us here? Why would he expose his own children? He didn't know. Not then, the sheriff said. By the time the pattern emerged, you had already been exposed. He spent the rest of his life trying to make amends. The accounting work was managing the trust fund, for you, for Ellie, for dozens of others. To pay for care when the symptoms eventually appeared. The choice they offered was simple. Leave, with symptoms that would progressively worsen until I became a shadow of myself, or stay and let them handle things humanely, with dignity, with financial compensation to any family I designated. I need time, I said. 3 days, the sheriff agreed. Then we need your decision. That was 4 days ago. I've spent every hour fishing since then, examining each catch meticulously. Yesterday, I found a small silver ring inside a pale carp, my father's wedding band, which he was supposedly buried with 10 years ago. My hands shake constantly now. The headaches are getting worse. And I understand now what brought Ellie back to this place, not just the symptoms, but the pull of answers, of resolution. They're waiting for my decision. But what they don't know is that I've been recording everything, our conversations, the video of Ellie, my findings from the fish. Every night, I upload the files to a cloud drive with instructions to my attorney if I don't check it weekly. Tonight I'll tell them my choice. I'll sit before their camera and make my statement. But unlike my sister, unlike my father, I won't choose silence or complicity. Sometimes the only way to fight poison is with poison. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the lake isn't what's beneath the surface. It's the person holding the fishing rod, collecting evidence one catch at a time, patient enough to wait for the moment when the truth finally breaks the surface. They thought I came here to fish for answers about my sister. They were wrong. I came to catch them. The day we breached the thermocline at Lake Vostok, I knew something was wrong. Not with the lake, with Dr. Reisner. We were 7 researchers at our temporary facility on the shores of the newly accessible subglacial lake. After decades of drilling through nearly 2 miles of Antarctic ice, we finally had access to what had been one of Earth's most isolated ecosystems for at least 15 million years. Dr. Eleanor Reisner was our team lead, brilliant and methodical. We'd collaborated on 3 previous expeditions studying extremophile bacteria in hostile environments. Her precision had kept us alive in conditions that killed less careful researchers. Which is why her behavior after our first deep water collection disturbed me so profoundly. Dr. Chin, verify these readings, she said that evening, sliding a tablet across the lab table. Her voice was steady, but her fingers left damp prints on the screen. I examined the data. Everything appeared consistent with our expectations for a long isolated body of water. Looks normal, I said. Why? What are you seeing? She took the tablet back. Nothing. It's fine. She hesitated. Have you experienced any unusual symptoms since we began sampling? Headaches? Disorientation? Just altitude adjustment. We were working at over 11,000 feet above sea level. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine, she said too quickly. Just being cautious. Unknown ecosystem, unknown risks. That night, I woke to her voice through the thin wall. Our sleeping quarters were Spartan, 6 small rooms branching off a central corridor. Unlike anything we've encountered before, she was saying. The cellular structure is. I don't know how to classify it. No, I haven't told the others. We need more data before creating unnecessary concern. I assumed she was recording research notes. But the secrecy was uncharacteristic. Our mandate required transparent documentation. The next morning, she announced changes to our protocols. I'll be leading all deep water sampling personally from now on, she declared. Dr. Chin will serve as my backup only. Carla Novak, our microbiologist, frowned. That contradicts our established rotation. We're all certified for deep collection. Safety concern. Reisner responded flatly. The thermocline zone appears to contain unusual properties. What properties? I asked. I'm still characterizing them, she said vaguely. Until then, we minimize exposure risk. Later that day, I noticed she'd reconfigured the wet lab's environmental safeguards. The air handling systems now operated at biosafety level 3 parameters, appropriate for serious pathogens. This for a lake we'd already determined contained nothing more dangerous than novel, but benign microbial life. Over the next 3 days, Reisner made solo dives to collect samples from the lake's deepest zones. Each time she emerged, she seemed more withdrawn. Dark circles formed beneath her eyes. During group meals, she barely spoke, instead scribbling constantly in a paper notebook, not our standard digital documentation. "It's too early to draw conclusions," became her mantra when questioned. On the fourth night, I found her in the lab at 2:30 a.m., hunched over a microscope. Beside her lay her notebook, open to a page covered in what looked like the same phrase written repeatedly in increasingly erratic handwriting. "Eleanor?" I said softly. She startled violently, slamming the notebook shut. For a moment, her expression was unrecognizable, feral, panicked. Then she composed herself. "Dr. Chin, you should be resting." "So should you," I replied. "Find something interesting?" "Nothing conclusive," she said, but her body blocked my view of both the microscope and her notes. "Then why are you running a genomic analysis at this hour?" I nodded toward the sequencer humming in the corner. Her eyes narrowed. "We have limited time here. Every hour counts." I moved toward the sample refrigerator, using the pretense of checking my cultures to edge closer to her workspace. I glimpsed her microscope's display screen showing what appeared to be standard bacterial cells. But then I noticed the scale bar. If calibrated correctly, these bacteria were nearly 200 micrometers in diameter, 40 times larger than typical bacterial cells. More concerning was their arrangement, perfectly geometric patterns that no natural bacterial colony would form. "These don't look like any bacteria I've ever seen," I said carefully. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Because they're not bacteria. At least, not conventionally." She tapped the screen. "They're communicating." A chill ran through me. Not because the claim was extraordinary, microbial communication via chemical signals is well documented, but because the rational, evidence-driven colleague I knew would never make such a definitive statement based on microscopy alone. "I've been observing them for days," she continued. "They respond to stimuli in coordinated ways. They arrange themselves in patterns with mathematical significance. That would require extraordinary evidence," I said carefully. "They know when they're being watched," she whispered. "They behave differently when I record them versus when I simply observe." Alarm bells rang in my mind. This wasn't scientific reasoning. This was paranoia. "Eleanor, when did you last sleep?" She waved the question away. "Listen to me. They're adapting to our presence. 15 million years in isolation, and within days of our arrival, they're already learning about us. They get into the equipment. The water filtration system. If you're concerned about contamination, we should alert the team." "No!" Her sharpness made me step back. "No one else can know yet. Not until I understand what they want." What they want. As if microorganisms had intentions. "I've made a breakthrough," she continued, suddenly energized. She flipped through notebook pages filled with repeating symbols and attempted translations. Phrases like, "below surface truth," and "join collective," jumped out at me. "Eleanor, this isn't science. You're projecting meaning onto random patterns." Her expression darkened. "You think I don't know the difference between pareidolia and actual communication? They're trying to make contact. And they've chosen me. I change tactics. Show me your evidence. Convince me." Hope flashed across her face, then suspicion. Finally, she nodded. "Tomorrow. The deep sampling dive. Come with me." I agreed, though my intention was getting her off-site for medical evaluation. Her behavior displayed classic signs of psychosis. I drafted an urgent email requesting emergency extraction, to be sent during our next satellite uplink. I woke to alarms blaring. Red emergency lights pulsed in the corridor. I rushed into the hallway with the other confused researchers. Tim Garcia, our engineer, emerged from the control room. "Environmental breach in the wet lab. Containment protocols activated. Where's Dr. Reisner?" His expression said everything. "Inside. She overrode safety protocols and sealed herself in." Through the observation window, Reisner moved methodically between stations, handling open sample containers without protective gear. Warning messages flashed. "Airborne contaminant detected. Unsafe oxygen levels, quarantine mode enabled. Eleanor! What are you doing? The safety systems are reading dangerous contamination levels. She looked up with an eerily serene smile. Dr. Chin. Right on time. I couldn't wait until tomorrow. They were ready now. She's opened all the deep water samples, Garcia whispered. Eleanor, you need to initiate decontamination and exit protocols immediately. Exposed? She laughed. Such a limited perspective. I'm not exposed to anything. I'm finally seeing clearly. She held up a flask of lake water. They've been down there, evolving in isolation, developing a collective intelligence beyond our comprehension. They don't communicate like we do. They communicate by becoming part of you. Horror washed over me as I noticed the half-empty drinking glass on her workstation. Did you consume the samples? Her smile widened. Integration was necessary for complete understanding. They've been alone for so long. And now they want to expand their network. I noticed her eyes had changed. A cloudy film had formed over them, giving them a milky quality. The filtration system, Garcia said, checking readings. She's disabled the water purification protocols. For the entire facility. Our drinking water came directly from melted ice. If she'd compromised that system. How long? I asked. At least 6 hours. Since the middle of the night. Listen carefully, Reisner said calmly. What's happening isn't contamination. It's evolution. The organisms in this lake developed a different path, collective rather than individual consciousness. They're not trying to harm us. They're trying to include us. Dr. Reisner, you're experiencing a psychological break, I said firmly. These are delusions brought on by some toxin or pathogen. But you'll understand soon. She smiled. You've all had the water. A chill ran through me as I remembered my morning coffee. Emergency protocols, I said, turning to Garcia. We need to alert the main station. Communications are down. The satellite uplink's physically damaged. We were isolated, potentially compromised, with no way to call for help. The nearest research station was over 200 miles away. Through the glass, Reisner watched our frantic conversation with placid interest, like a scientist observing specimens. Over the next 12 hours, we attempted every possible solution. Nothing worked. And one by one, my colleagues began to change. It started subtly. Garcia became unnaturally calm about our predicament. His eyes developed the same cloudy film as Reisner's. Novak began talking about beautiful symmetry and the elegance of collective thought, staring for hours at water droplets under magnification. By the time our scheduled check-in with the main Antarctic research base was missed and a rescue team dispatched, 3 days had passed. 3 days of watching my colleagues transform, not in any Hollywood monster movie way, but in the most human and therefore most terrifying way possible. Their personalities, their priorities, their fundamental sense of self, all shifting towards something alien yet eerily coherent. Only I remained unchanged. Or at least, I believed I was unchanged. They assured me I was simply integrating more slowly. The rescue team will find a fully functioning research station with healthy-appearing scientists. All documentation will be in order. The only anomaly will be me, the lone team member suffering from acute psychological distress. I've locked myself in the communications room, barricaded the door. My colleagues wait patiently outside. They don't need to break the door down. Time is on their side. It's not invasion, Reisner told me this morning. It's symbiosis. Evolution. The next step. I've attempted to transmit this account during every satellite window, but I suspect they've compromised the systems. The rescue team is scheduled to arrive tomorrow. I can already see the conclusions in their report. One researcher succumbed to psychological pressure, while the others function normally. Because the alternative is too terrifying, that beneath the Antarctic ice, something evolved. Not a monster, not a pathogen, but a different approach to consciousness itself. A collective that doesn't destroy its hosts, but incorporates them. Changes them. convinces them they've found a better way of being. And the most terrifying part? As the hours pass, as I feel subtle changes beginning within my own mind, a treacherous thought keeps surfacing. What if they're right? The door won't hold forever. Neither will I. To whoever finds this, the lake should remain sealed. Not because what's there wants to harm us, but because it wants to change us. And because, in time, we might welcome that change. I can feel myself starting to. The first red flag should have been the inexplicable ease with which I got the job. 26 years old with no maritime experience beyond fishing trips with my uncle, yet somehow deemed qualified to work as a deckhand on a Great Lakes freighter. But when you're 3 months behind on rent and eating ramen for the 5th straight day, you don't question good fortune. You grab it with both hands. The Edmund Morris wasn't the largest vessel on the lakes, a 730-foot bulk carrier hauling iron ore and occasional grain shipments between Duluth and Detroit. But to someone who'd never seen the ocean, the ship seemed massive, a floating industrial complex with a skeleton crew of 19 people isolated together for weeks at a time, traveling across waters deep enough to swallow skyscrapers. Captain Thorne conducted my interview personally. A weathered man in his 60s with eyes that reminded me of winter ice, pale blue and depthless. He asked few questions about my experience, and seemed more interested in my family situation. No wife? Children? Parents still living? He inquired. My mother died last year. Haven't spoken to my father in a decade, I replied. He nodded, as if this answer pleased him. Any close friends? Relationships? I move around a lot. Good. The lakes demand sacrifice. Not everyone understands that. He stamped my employment papers. Welcome aboard, Mr. Keller. I reported for duty 2 days later, as the Edmund Morris prepared to depart from the port of Duluth. The other crew members barely acknowledged me, unusual in my experience with blue-collar jobs, when new faces typically received either friendly hazing or open hostility. Here, there was only a hollow disinterest, as if they'd seen too many come and go to bother learning another name. Only Wesley, the cook, showed any warmth. A heavy-set man with a perpetual sheen of sweat on his brow, he served me extra portions at dinner on my first night aboard. You're too skinny, he remarked. Lakes will eat you alive if you don't bulk up. That first week passed in a blur of physical exhaustion. I learned the routines, the endless maintenance, the precise choreography required to keep a massive steel vessel functioning. I collapsed into my narrow bunk each night, too tired to even dream. It was during my second week that I began noticing the oddities. First, there were the whispered conversations that abruptly ceased whenever I approached. Then, the strange ritual before we crossed into the deeper waters of Lake Superior, Captain Thorne cutting his finger and allowing a single drop of blood to fall into the water as we passed a certain marker. The crew members called it tradition, but their eyes held something like fear. Most disturbing were the night watches. Every crew member took turns, even those whose regular duties kept them below decks. 2 hours of solitary patrol around the ship's perimeter between 2 and 4 a.m. The instructions were bizarre: maintain constant motion, never look at the water for more than 5 seconds, and most importantly, never respond to your name if you hear it called. Who would be calling my name in the middle of Lake Superior? I asked Durbin, the first mate who trained me. His weathered face tightened. Just follow the rules, Keller. During my first night watch, I understood a fraction of their concern. The vastness of the lake at night was disorienting, a perfect black void surrounding our illuminated island of steel. The gentle slapping of waves against the hull created an acoustic illusion, sometimes sounding like hushed voices. The isolation played tricks on your mind. By my 3rd week aboard, I'd settled into the rhythm. The work was hard but straightforward, the pay excellent. I began to think I could do this long term, banking enough money to perhaps start over somewhere new after a year or 2. Then Marshall disappeared. He'd been a quiet oiler, responsible for machinery maintenance below decks. I barely knew him beyond nods in the narrow corridors. One morning, he simply wasn't at breakfast. His bunk hadn't been slept in. His personal effects remained untouched in his locker. The crew's reaction disturbed me more than the disappearance itself. There was no panic, no emergency protocols, no turning back to search. Captain Thorne made a brief announcement. Marshall has chosen to depart. We continue our route. Chosen to depart. In the middle of Lake Huron. That night, I cornered Wesley in the galley after dinner. What happened to Marshall? I demanded. People don't just vanish from ships. Wesley's hands trembled slightly as he kneaded dough for the next day's bread. They do on the lakes. Especially this route. What does that mean? Did he fall overboard? Kill himself? Wesley looked around nervously, though we were alone. Listen carefully, because I'm only saying this once. There's something wrong with this ship. With this route. With Thorne. People disappear, usually one per season. Always when we're crossing the deepest parts of Superior. That's insane. Why would anyone keep working here? His laugh held no humor. Triple wages compared to other vessels. And most who sign on don't have much waiting for them on shore. Like you? Like me? He paused. There's another reason. Anyone who quits, who tries to report what happens, they tend to have accidents. Fatal ones. I felt cold despite the kitchen's heat. You're saying the crew is killing people? Not the crew. Wesley whispered. Thorne. Or whatever Thorne serves. He wiped his hands on his apron. Just keep your head down. Do the night watches exactly as instructed. We reach Detroit in 9 days. You can disappear at port if you're smart. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through possibilities. A rational part of me suggested Wesley was pulling an elaborate prank on the new guy. Or perhaps he was mentally unstable. But his fear had seemed genuine. The next day, I began watching more carefully. I noticed how the crew grew increasingly tense as we approached the deeper regions of the lake. How they performed small personal rituals, touching metal 3 times before going on deck, wearing specific items of clothing, muttering what sounded like prayers. Captain Thorne's behavior changed too. He spent more time on the bridge, staring out at the water with an expression of anticipation. Twice I caught him having intense conversations with Durbin, the first mate, falling silent when they noticed me. 5 days out from Detroit, I was assigned the night watch again. The Edmund Morris was crossing the deepest part of Lake Superior, over 1,300 feet of cold, black water beneath our hull. I paced the prescribed route, fighting fatigue and growing paranoia. Halfway through my watch, I heard it. My name, called softly but distinctly from somewhere beyond the railing. Nathan. I froze, remembering the instructions. Never respond if you hear your name called. Never look at the water for more than 5 seconds. Nathan, please. Help me. The voice was Marshall's. I was certain of it, though I'd rarely heard him speak. It came again, more desperate. I'm still alive down here. Please. Against every instruction, I approached the railing and peered into the darkness below. The ship's lights illuminated perhaps 15 feet of black water before darkness consumed everything. Nothing visible. Yet the voice had been so clear. A heavy hand clamped on my shoulder. I nearly screamed. Dangerous to linger at the edge, Keller. Captain Thorne's voice was conversational, but his grip felt like iron. Especially when you hear things. I couldn't tell if his statement was a threat or a warning. I thought I heard someone call my name. His pale eyes studied me. The lakes are full of echoes. Deceptive sounds carried across water. Part of why we have the rule about not responding. He released my shoulder. Finish your watch. Interior routes only for the rest of the night. The next morning, Wesley was gone. His galley was spotless, bread dough rising in covered bowls for breakfast. But the man himself had vanished like morning mist. Another, chosen to depart. According to Thorne's terse announcement. That night, I picked the lock on Wesley's quarters. Inside, everything appeared normal until I checked beneath his bunk. There I found a waterproof container holding a logbook, not standard ship's documentation, but Wesley's personal record. The entries dated back 2 years, detailing each departure. Crew members who disappeared after seeing or hearing something during night watches. Meticulous notes about the ship's location during each vanishing. Theories about what was happening, growing increasingly desperate and paranoid. The final entry was dated the previous night. Asterisk told Keller too much. Thorn knows. Saw them talking on bridge, Durbin pointing to galley. Thorn coming down now. Won't be like the others. Going on my terms, asterisk. Scribbled below in shaky handwriting. Asterisk Thorn not human. Watch eyes when passing marker 23. Reflective like animals, asterisk. I closed the logbook, my heart hammering. Wesley hadn't been mentally unstable. He'd been terrified. And now he was gone, jumped overboard rather than facing whatever fate awaited those who departed. 3 more days to Detroit. 3 more nights to survive. I considered confronting Thorn, but Wesley's warnings about accidents kept me silent. Instead, I began documenting everything myself, sending daily emails to a scheduled delay account that would forward to multiple recipients if I didn't reset it within 72 hours. The crew grew increasingly agitated as we began our approach to Detroit. Normal routines dissolved into tense silences and furtive glances. Night watches doubled, always in pairs now. I was partnered with Durbin, Thorn's apparent second-in-command, which felt less like protection and more like surveillance. 2 nights before arrival, as we passed through Lake Erie, Durbin finally spoke more than basic instructions. You've been asking questions, Keller. Poking around. I kept my expression neutral. Just trying to understand the operation. Some things aren't meant to be understood. Just respected. He gazed across the dark water. The Great Lakes are ancient. What they want, they take. Fighting that only makes it worse. What who takes? Thorn? Durbin's laugh was hollow. Thorn's just the intermediary. Has been for nearly 40 years. Before him, it was Captain Willard. Always someone willing to make the arrangement. What arrangement? Safe passage. Profitable shipping. In exchange for considerations. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the night air. Human sacrifices, you mean? He flinched at the directness. The old ways. The necessary ways. That's insane. It's murder. Is it murder to pay the toll for crossing someone else's territory? Durbin's voice hardened. Look around you, Keller. Thousands of ships have gone down in these waters. We survive. We profit. Because you're feeding people to, what? The lake? What lives in the deep parts of the lake, he corrected. The truly deep parts. Where the bottom hasn't been properly mapped because instruments fail. Where the water is older than human memory. I stared at him, searching for signs of delusion. His eyes remained clear, his expression grave. You don't have to believe. You just have to decide if you're staying on after Detroit. The pay's good. The work's steady. And the departures are seldom more than 1 or 2 a season. You can't seriously think I'd stay. You might. Especially when you understand the alternative. He looked at me with something like pity. Those who know but don't join us tend to meet unfortunate ends. Maritime accidents. Drownings. Even hundreds of miles from any shore. The threat hung between us like fog. I'll take my chances, I said finally. He nodded, unsurprised. We dock tomorrow night. Whatever you're planning, I'd advise against it. Some things reach farther than you'd imagine. Especially for those it's tasted. Tasted? What are you talking about? The night watch when you heard your name. You looked into the water, didn't you? For more than the allowed 5 seconds. His expression was grim. It got a taste of you then. A connection. It knows your name now. Knows your face. I wanted to dismiss his words as superstitious nonsense, yet a deep unease had taken root. I remembered the voice calling my name. The inexplicable certainty that it had been Marshall. We docked in Detroit the next evening. I had my bag packed, ready to walk away and never look back. As the crew secured the vessel, Captain Thorne summoned me to his quarters. "You'll be departing us here, I understand," he said without preamble. "Yes, sir." "Family emergency." The lie fell flat between us. "Family emergency," he repeated. "Yet you have no family. No connections. No one to miss you." He studied my face. "We need reliable crew, Mr. Keller. People who understand discretion. Loyalty. I'm not reliable enough for this ship." Something flickered behind his pale eyes, anger, certainly, but also something like hunger. "The lakes remember those who deny them, Mr. Keller. Especially Superior. Its waters are patient." I maintained eye contact through sheer force of will. "I'll take that under advisement, Captain." That night, I walked off the Edmund Morris and didn't look back. I sent my documentation to the Coast Guard, to maritime authorities, to investigative journalists. Nothing came of it. Investigations found no evidence of wrongdoing. Crew manifests showed no missing persons. Wesley and Marshall appeared in records as having departed voluntarily at previous ports. I moved inland, as far from the Great Lakes as I could manage. For a time, I convinced myself it had been an elaborate hazing ritual, or perhaps even a shared delusion among an isolated crew. Then the dreams began. Nightly visions of black water. My name, called in Marshall's voice, then Wesley's, then a chorus of others I never knew. The sensation of cold depths closing over my head. Most disturbing of all, Captain Thorne standing on distant shores, pale eyes watching, waiting. I wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat that smells of lake water. 3 days ago, I received a job offer. Excellent salary. Benefits. Relocation expenses paid. The company's name was unfamiliar, but the address wasn't. Duluth, Minnesota. Port City on Lake Superior. Yesterday, I found myself researching rental properties there. Checking flight prices. Feeling an inexplicable pull northward, toward deep water. I haven't accepted the offer. Not yet. But each night, the dreams grow more vivid. Each morning, I find myself more convinced that fighting is futile. That returning is inevitable. The Great Lakes are patient. And whatever waits in their depths remembers my name. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.